welcome. Great to have you with us to be able to chat to you about the economy and the property market.
It's good to be here.
So to begin with, against the current economic conditions in the South African economy, how would you describe the health of the property market in terms of appetite from a buyer and seller perspective?
Well, I think there's two markets at the moment. There's the Western Cape and then there's the rest. And certainly the Western Cape over the last few years has been outperforming the rest of the national housing market by miles. To an extent, I would even say it's got a bit bubbly around the mountain in the areas on Table Mountain and near to it. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of the country, the biggest market being Gauteng and just about everywhere else outside the Western Cape, the markets more or less track the economy, and that has meant since 2012 a weakening economic growth rate, weakening job creation, weakening household income growth, and also rising interest rates from 2014 to early last year has softened demand. And I'd say you could call it a mediocre market at best. Mm-hmm. We have had a little bit of a perk up in the national house price inflation rate, in line with signs that the economy may just be turning slightly for the better. So we got to 5.5% year-on-year house price growth in April, mm-hmm. according to our index. That, however, is still below CPI inflation. So in real terms, that's still negative. So not wildly exciting at the moment. And I think realistically, although there are signs of some mild economic improvement from last year's near 0% growth, I don't think we can we can get too excited about economic recovery. And I still think we'll bumble along in the housing market on a national average basis in lower single-digit house price growth for possibly the next few years.
Data also suggests that consumers right now are cash-strapped. They're highly indebted. Having said what you just said, given that negative sentiment is most likely to impact on consumers' buying decisions when it comes to property, what advice as a property strategist can you offer to those potential home buyers?
So I would say we need to, especially in these more uncertain economic times and more volatile times, as we're probably heading towards some sort of political change, whatever that may be, that a more cautious approach gets taken. And what that normally means is you've got to think carefully about two of your biggest purchases, which imply a whole lot of recurrent expenditures. The biggest one is the house. The bigger the house you buy, the higher the operating costs. The more expensive the house, the higher the rates and tariffs, the rates bill. So, if you buy half the size of a house that you would have thought of buying, with that comes a lot less operating costs, maintenance costs, cleaning costs, whatever it might be. Think about that carefully. There's a lot of insurance costs. There's a myriad of costs involved with the house. And then the second most important one is your car. With that comes a whole lot again, maintenance costs, insurance costs, and so on. And the more expensive cars, that tends to be more, so on average. So it's important to make those decisions, because reversing a property decision, if you find you've overcommitted. Now, just to give you an idea of how many people have effectively overcommitted, right now, or in the most recent FNB estate agent survey, about 13% of sellers are estimated to be downscaling due to financial pressure. So effective, now that's a good number. That was 34% back in 2009. It's not a bad number. What it means is that at any given stage, there's a very significant amount of people that find out they've overcommitted for whatever reason. They can't maintain the costs involved with this house, sell to downscale. The transaction costs involved with the house are huge. It's a very expensive mistake to make. Mm-hmm. So people have to think carefully. It's nice to own a house, but one has to think carefully and buy well within your means, and be prepared for interest rate hikes should they resume. Be prepared for rates and tariff hikes, sure, which have been above inflation. Very, very important.
Sure. Thank you, John. One last question to you. How can a current bondholder who finds himself to be indebted use his bond account to leverage and to use that as a leverage to turn around his personal finances?
Well, many of us, in a lot of ways, you can consolidate a lot of your debt. The home loan is very often cheaper than the credit card debt, or the personal loan debt, or even the vehicle finance debt. So, if consolidating a lot of your debt in a home loan is not a bad idea. even possibly with sort of an extension of, a further loan, if you can avoid that higher cost debt. I guess that's the one thing. A lot of us with the prepaid loans, we pay down the loan well in advance of the schedule. It means that you've got room to access that bond. And so a person like myself, for instance, I use my bond, where every number of years when you have to buy a new car, the bond is very often a cheaper form of financing than vehicle finance. So it's a good way to, it's something to think about. And then, of course, important is any spare cash lying around. In a low interest current account, put it into that home loan, that flexi account where you can put it in and withdraw it as you need it. Put it in there for as long as you don't need it, as much as you can and for as long as you don't need it. And that cuts your interest rate, which is accumulated on a daily basis. The small increments of interest are accumulated to your account, accrued to you on a daily basis. You cut that by, 20,000, 50,000, whatever, every little bit helps. So your daily interest goes down, it accumulates.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.